went and got the divorce through the church, but there was no legal marriage. So, and they all made more money than me, so there was no alimony to be paid.
Okay.
You kind of said in your interrogation that you were offended by your children.
The reunion was meant to be a celebration and an opportunity for the Special Forces cast to look back on their demanding experience as a group. However, the tone changed as soon as Kody Brown took the stage. It turned into the Kody Brown Show rather than a fair discussion. His voice dominated the room as he leaned closer, and it soon became apparent that this would not be a reunion. A monologue was the plan. Kody's words filled every pause as the other actors attempted to talk. With his lengthy explanations and personal asides, he acted as if he owned the spotlight and overshadowed everyone else's voices. One individual who was determined to control the narrative took over the reunion, which was supposed to emphasize a shared hardship. As the minutes passed, the audience sensed that Kody was protecting himself, rewriting his experience, and refusing to allow anybody else to define it, not reflecting. Alright guys, buckle up, because what I just watched was one of the most shocking reality TV reunion moments I've ever seen. Kody Brown, the star of Sister Wives, managed to turn the Special Forces reunion into his own personal monologue, and let me tell you, it was messy. From dodging responsibility with his kids, to lying about money, to dropping bizarre comments about Janelle's so-called spiritual release. This was the kind of interview that explains exactly why his children are furious with him. Let's break it down. Anyone who attempted to intervene was drowned out by Kody's voice, which swept through the room like a flood. He pushed past each cast member who leaned forward to provide their viewpoint, filling the void with his own remarks each time. It was control, not simply confidence. He talked in long, convoluted words, returning to himself repeatedly, as if the reunion were merely to provide his version of events. The rest sat silently, some looking at each other, waiting for someone to say anything. Kody never gave them one, though. He dominated the talk, his tone was demanding, and his presence was overbearing. With Kody at the center and refusing to let go of the spotlight, what should have been a group reflection devolved into a performance. Natalie had remained silent while Kody's never-ending explanations filled the room. Eventually, though, she leaned forward and interrupted his tirade with her voice. She would not allow him to evade the truth. She questioned him calmly but firmly about his kids and the statements he made that he was reaching out when, in fact, he wasn't. Not only was she a co-host, but she also spoke from personal experience and an honesty that Kody couldn't equal, so her opinions had weight. The space moved. The tension was evident when Kody was directly faced for the first time. Although it wasn't hostile, Natalie's challenge was unwavering. She insisted that he elaborate on what reaching out actually meant. And he was no longer in control of the spotlight at that precise time. It was a test, and the results showed how flimsy his story really was. As Natalie's queries pierced the wall of words he had constructed around himself, Kody's face tensed. Rather than responding openly, he leaned back and scoffed at her. He tried to silence her by saying, "This isn't the proper venue," as though discussing his shortcomings as a father wasn't appropriate on the reunion stage. In an effort to stop her and regain control of the conversation, the words hung heavily. However, the quiet was short-lived. Kody continued chatting even after saying it wasn't the appropriate moment or location. He stacked excuses on top of justifications, added cautions, and concocted fresh explanations. The contradiction at the core of his performance was made clear by his refusal to stop. He didn't want to be questioned, but he couldn't help but keep defending himself. The tension in the room increased as he talked, and it became increasingly clear that Natalie had triggered a nerve. Kody's tone became defensive as the topic of money came up. Leaning into the microphone, he maintained that since all of his wives had earned more money than he had, he was not entitled to alimony. The sentences sounded sharp and practiced, as if he had said this phrase numerous times. However, the assertion seemed hollow. The tension in the room increased as those listening realized the truth didn't fit his version of events. It was more than simply his denial. It was the way he presented himself as the victim and implied that he was the one who was left behind monetarily. There was a hint of resentment in his comments, as he refused to recognize the sacrifices his wife had made. The distance between his fiction and reality was palpable to the crowd, and at that point, the holes in his story were visible, revealing the fabrications he had made to defend himself. Kody's constant explanations had already caused tension in the room, but then he revealed something that astounded everyone. He abruptly revealed in passing that Janelle had had a spiritual release. His statements were almost casual, as though they were well known, as though everyone should already know what he meant. However, the phrase lingered in the atmosphere, perplexing, unnerving, and utterly inappropriate. There was only a bizarre discovery thrown into the middle of his defense, no background or justification. The crowd shifted, with some people looking at each other and others waiting for him to explain, but Kody continued as if nothing out of the ordinary had been uttered. It seemed like a diversion, a quick diversion designed to divert focus from the charges against him. Rather, it simply strengthened the impression that he was fabricating tales, covering the gaps in his story with strange details. Kody's face hardened as the discussion shifted to accountability. Leaning forward and speaking in a frustrated tone, he maintained that the show had made him accept responsibility for actions he hadn't even taken. He portrayed himself as the victim of reality TV, saying that the show's producers misrepresented facts and made him apologize for things he didn't do. Each remark was designed to shift the responsibility away from him, and the words flowed out like a shield. However, his refusal was evident beneath the surface. He was changing the narrative to protect himself, not taking responsibility for his decisions or admitting the suffering his family endured. The discrepancy between his explanation of events and the reality they had witnessed was evident to the audience. There was denial rather than accountability. Resentment took the place of humility. And in that instant, Kody showed his inability to accept the reality of what he had done, in addition to his rage at the show. Leaning on a well-known phrase, Kody repeated it as if it would clear his name. With a firm but hollow voice, he stated, "Almost all of my children were adults when the divorces happened." Every time the topic of his broken family was brought up, he clung to this sentence, which served as his shield. He spoke it with conviction, as though the words themselves might make the truth of what had been lost disappear. But in the hush that followed, the truth remained. The faces of the children who were still in school, still in need of a parent, and who had not yet reached adulthood were disregarded by his words. Kody attempted to lessen the impact of his absence by presenting it in this way, making it appear less harsh and destructive. But the more times he said it, the more it sounded like a pretext, a well-written disclaimer that showed how unwilling he was to face the suffering he had created. Kody never stopped saying Truly's name. She didn't exist in his version of events, at least not as the young girl she was when everything went wrong. When her father wandered away and her parents' marriage fell apart, she was only 10 or 11 years old, still in the precarious stage between childhood and puberty. However, in Kody's account, she was eliminated and included under the general justification that all the kids were adults. The truth was more brutal. Truly was still longing for a father who never came, still in need of comfort and direction that never materialized. Her childhood was characterized by the emptiness he refused to accept, and her silence served as evidence of his absence. And the audience felt the weight of what he didn't say while he talked and changed the story to fit his own needs. The story Kody wished to preserve had overshadowed Truly's early years. Even though Kody acted as though Savannah's story didn't exist, it was identical. When she and Janelle parted ways, she was still a high school student juggling academics, friendships, and the precarious years leading up to adulthood. However, in Kody's version, she was swept up in the same justification as the others, referred to as an adult in his story, removed from the fact that she was a kid who had been deserted by her father. There was no denying the reality. Savannah had been abandoned, her father not present at significant turning points, and her voice had been muffled in the version of events he chose to tell. Kody attempted to minimize the impact of his absence by neglecting her youth, but it only served to highlight how profound it was. Savannah was a daughter who needed her father, and he wasn't there. She wasn't mature or self-sufficient. It was hard to overlook McKelty's simmering rage. She couldn't keep quiet after witnessing her younger sister truly struggles and the deep wounds caused by Kody's absence in the family. For McKelty, the children who still needed her father and were too little to bear the burden of his abandonment were more important than her own relationship with him. Every time Kody reiterated his justifications and maintained that the most of his children were grown up by the time the marriages ended, her annoyance increased. The knowledge of the truth raged within McKelty. Wasn't really a grown-up. Savannah was not a grown-up. They were abandoned, and they were kids. McKelty saw Kody's statements as betrayals and an attempt to hide the hurt of the people he had let down, not just lies. In her rage, she expressed what many of the siblings felt, which was that his justifications would never be enough to undo the harm Dad had caused. For a long time, Leon had kept quiet, observing from the sidelines as their father twisted the facts and made up stories. However, the hush shattered after the reunion, after hearing Kody reject his kids and distort reality once more. Leon's thoughts broke through the clutter on social media with clarity and rage. They confronted him head-on, refusing to accept his justifications. It was a declaration rather than merely a post. In addition to speaking for themselves, Leon also represented the siblings who had been burdened by his absence. Their message was direct, unapologetic, and it expressed the years-long displeasure. The distance between parent and child was exposed for everyone to see in that instant. Once quiet, Leon's speech took on the echo of a family weary of being forgotten and weary of seeing Kody alter their lives to fit his own story. As the pressure increased, Kody turned to reality TV as his go-to scapegoat. He talked extensively about how his life had been distorted by the cameras, how family members had been set against each other by producers, and how his relationships had been ruined by the incessant need for drama. He spoke in a tone that suggested he was anxious to pin the blame for his family's divisions on a show, rather than his own decisions. He portrayed himself as a victim of manipulation and related instances in which he was told to accept responsibility for actions he denied. But the more he talked, the more obvious it became that this was about him, not television. The show hadn't caused him to become estranged from his kids or taken him out of their lives. He was responsible for that. Reality TV, however, turned into the antagonist in Kody's story, providing an easy justification for a family that was shattered by his own inability to accept reality. Once more, Kody's comments changed, becoming almost confessional. Without hesitation, he acknowledged that he was not a grounded person. As if it were intended to explain away everything else, the sentence hung in the air, hefty but oddly hollow. Rather than evoking self-awareness, it sounded like justification for his inability to accept responsibility for the rifts in his family. He talked as though being ungrounded absolved him, as though it justified his separation from his kids and the quiet that pervaded everyday life, milestones, and birthdays. Every admission was veiled in deception, and every truth was softened into an excuse for his lack of accountability, so the audience could perceive the pattern. His confession was not one of weakness at that time. It was an additional line of defense, a wall constructed to prevent him from being held accountable. The harm was evident by the time the reunion was over. More than anybody else, Kody had talked, yet his words had left a path of inconsistencies, justifications, and fresh wounds. The actors could sense it, the audience could see it, and his family, who were observing from a distance, was unable to ignore it. Because of the way he erased their childhoods and disregarded their experiences, his children's rage had evolved from a private irritation to a public reckoning. The repercussions extended outside the stage. The suffering of siblings McKelty, Savannah, and Truly, all of whom have scars from a father who refused to accept responsibility, was echoed by Leon's voice on social media. Although the reunion was supposed to show resiliency, it instead showed division. Kody's insistence on being in charge of the story only served to emphasize how little power he actually has. His lies were coming apart, his family was speaking out, and the future he was attempting to shield with justifications was getting farther away. After the reconnection, Kody's remarks continued to reverberate like unabated echoes. He was unaware of the deeper wounds caused by his persistence on making excuses, his inability to accept his children's suffering, and his persistent distortion of the facts. The family had stopped being quiet. A chorus of voices emerged, opposing his story: Leon's scathing cries, McKelty's rage, and the subdued realities of Savannah and Truly. But Kody appeared unaffected by it all. He presented himself as if his version of events were the only one that counted, and the storm around him was just noise. However, the fissures deepened beneath the surface. His children no longer consented to have their lives rewritten by him or to be deleted. Not only had the reunion shown his inconsistencies, but it had also signaled a sea change. He could no longer tell the narrative alone. The women had had enough of listening. For years, Kody's never-ending explanations had eclipsed their voices and altered their realities. But suddenly, one by one, they started talking with a clarity that broke through his barriers. As she spoke of the tranquility she had discovered outside of his control, Christine's tone remained steady, and her words held the weight of independence. Janelle's voice came next, piercing with truth, refusing to let Kody's justifications take away from the truth of what she had gone through. Mary, who had been silent for a long time, started to speak up, her presence serving as a reminder of the years she had been ignored. Their voices blended into a chorus that was impossible for Kody to break. Every lady talked from her own suffering, resiliency, and separation from him. And the story changed in their words. It was the tale of women taking back their lives and refusing to let his version of events define them. It was no longer the Kody Brown show. The spouses would no longer allow him to handle the pen once the reunion revealed the truth. Instead of being dispersed or isolated, the children's voices started to rise collectively. Each one contained a unique narrative and anguish. But when combined, they became an unstoppable chorus. The quiet realities of Savannah and Truly, McKelty's rage, and Leon's scathing remarks all contributed to a communal reckoning. Now, they were bonded not only by blood, but also by their common experience of being removed from their father's story. They were powerful because of their oneness. Kody had depended on division, secrecy, and the belief that the suffering of each child would be kept secret for years. However, everything had altered after the reconnection. The youngsters had been forced into a single voice and one truth by the lies, justifications, and rejections. And Kody's authority started to erode in the face of that reality. There were other stories being told besides his. His voice could never have resonated as loudly as the children's, who had reclaimed it. The people reacted quickly after witnessing the reunion. Previously unconvinced viewers suddenly recognized the flaws in Kody's story. His constant justifications, his erasing of young children, and his attempts to place the responsibility on reality TV all sounded insubstantial in comparison to his family's honest statements. His well-crafted defenses lost ground to the children's voices as the audience started to support them. The tide turned on social media. Comments flooded in, emphasizing Savannah and Truly's lost childhoods and echoing McKelty's annoyance and Leon's scathing remarks. A story based on suffering and honesty was taking the place of the one Kody was trying to manage. The public was listening to the voices of people he had silenced and was no longer interested in his justifications. Kody was exposed in a way he had never been before when his hold on the narrative broke during that change. The media started to pay attention. The headlines changed, accentuating the voices of Kody's children rather than his well-crafted justifications. The rage, the hurt, and the truth that had surfaced during the reunion were brought to light in interviews, articles, and criticism. The public was shown Savannah and Truly's lost childhoods, Leon's statements were cited, and McKelty's displeasure was analyzed. Once in control, Kody's story was now facing constant opposition. The media portrayed him as a man unable to accept the repercussions of his decisions, rather than the misunderstood father he professed to be. The picture he attempted to preserve was eroded by each story that spread, and the unvarnished truth his family had shouted out loud took its place. Kody's explanations could no longer drown out the children's cries, since the media had turned into an amplifier, carrying them well beyond the reunion stage. Let us know in your comments. And stay tuned by subscribing our channel to get more updates like this. Thanks everyone.